Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mordecai. For those of you who haven't seen my content before, I am a video game and tabletop role-playing game enthusiast who narrates over RPG horror stories for potential considerations to help improve play at the table, so that everyone at the table can have a fun time. Most of these RPG horror stories are to do with players or GMs who create issues for the table and thus ruin the experience. Today's story is not about a more conventional RPG horror story, but rather about the new open game license and its implications for the future of tabletop role-playing games and content creators. Before we can get started on the topic of this video, I am by no means a lawyer. I also want to make it clear that at the time of this video, the OGL 1.1 has merely been leaked, and the official word from WotC as a company has been a single tweet through D&D Beyond prior to their news update, which was curiously also released through D&D Beyond. As you can see, their initial tweet itself says very little of relevance, merely that we as invested consumers are to stand by and await further information. Given that a similar-ish natured statement was issued by Bethesda shortly after Mick Gordon posted a massive article that exposed horrible working conditions, this does not bode well for any good intentions that WotC may still have, as statements such as the one through what was once a third-party service erode perceptions of goodwill. This is on top of what information can be gleaned through the leaked documents. We will talk about the news update that was released today. Despite everything that is happening, please do not harass WotC or any other company or person mentioned in this video. To be clear, whilst nothing has been officially confirmed by WotC with regards to the leaked version of the new open game license, it is also true that they haven't denied anything either. For the purposes of this video, we will make the assumption that the leaked version of Open Game License 1.1 is going to be released as is in an official capacity soon enough. It is over 9,000 words in length, and extremely thick in legalese, and thus I shall link to an article written by an intellectual property lawyer, Noah Downs, that can explain the legalese far better than I can. We also need to briefly discuss the news update that was released a few hours ago, as it contains some information which is highly concerning. Whilst I myself agree that preventing the use of D&D as part of NFT-related scandals by reaffirming that the OGL is only meant to be limited to homebrew content is an important goal, and the other two goals stated are also rather admirable in a way, the problem is that the leaked OGL would never have succeeded at all three goals without also potentially destroying the livelihood of those homebrew content creators that they are suddenly so interested in keeping safe. I like how they state that their plan was always to include the broader community in drafting up the new OGL, except that we were never intended to see the draft version of the new open gaming license. The only reason we are seeing the draft version of the new OGL is because someone leaked it out to the public. And if they were really intent on getting the broader community involved with drafting up a new OGL, they would have handled this in an entirely different manner that would not have incited the rightful rage of that community. To me, this blog post reads like a public relations stunt designed to try and get everyone to calm down whilst they scramble to write an updated version. This does mean that we can analyse what WotC was attempting to do with the leaked version of their draft OGL, as though it were fully intended, which I sincerely hope dates this year. I want to be wrong about a lot of what this video contains, even if it is too late for D&D as a whole. To explain why the changes introduced with the leaked version of the 1.1 version of the Open Gaming License are devastating to the D&D community as a whole, we need to have a brief reminder of the original Open Game License. The original is a license which allows third-party content creators to create homebrew or custom assets for Dungeons & Dragons. It also allows them to publish and even sell this content without paying royalties so long as the content isn't just a reprint of the core systems for D&D. This would thus require those who invested into the third-party content to also purchase the core material released by WotC, or at least that was the theory. The original Open Game License was a perpetual license, and was supposed to be effectively irrevocable according to an FAQ that was once on the WotC official website, but is no longer. I could not find the FAQ anywhere through the Wayback Machine, but thankfully Noah Downs' article has a screenshot of the FAQ in question. As you can see, the FAQ implies that third-party content creators and end consumers are supposed to be able to ignore the changes made to the OGL if they disagree with them and there is an older version that suits their needs when a newer, updated version cannot. It is rather unfortunate, therefore, that they have written up this new open gaming license meant to be a full-on replacement, even retroactively. Where the problems begin with OGL 1.1 are to do with its design philosophy, in that it is designed to target third-party content creators, specifically those who produce homebrew content such as modules, adventures, settings, classes, races, mechanics, and potentially even live streams and videos. We will get into that latter part shortly. Specifically, it states that any content produced and commercially published under the new license, which is required in order to publish any seemingly related content to D&D, can now be freely used by WotC in any capacity, indefinitely, without direct permission or compensation. For example, if someone were to create a setting which had a D&D character who was a warlock and had a small phoenix for a familiar, and wanted to commercially publish that in some form, WotC could now enforceably use that IP in any future module, setting, or adventure, and said creator would not receive any financial compensation. Additionally, it states that if the third-party publisher makes above a certain amount of gross revenue, the figure stated in the leaked OGL is $750,000 per year, that they have to pay between 20 to 25% of that revenue to WotC. That's not from the profits earned. This is directly coming from the raw income before considering taxation, cost of production, and other business expenses. Considering that the estimated profit margin for small companies is estimated to be between roughly 10 to 20% of the gross revenue, this will require those companies to hike up the prices of their products in order to break even. Or worse, they might have to start cutting down on how many staff members they are employing, which in turn also hurts the financial pockets of the consumers of those products. In case you are wondering if that means that a third-party content creator can just make below that threshold, this new OGL has a clause that implies that they can alter the threshold for when a company has to start paying royalties. And remember, this is on top of the new license allowing WotC to then take the products produced by small companies and effectively republish them without compensation. It's horrendously anti-consumer. It's practically a form of legal exploitation. However, we are only scratching the surface. Where things start to become really concerning is that OGL 1.1 is meant to usurp the original OGL, which allowed people to create their own intellectual property and create third-party content which can then be sold and used for Dungeons & Dragons without paying royalties. An OGL which was meant to be a perpetual license, which was also supposed to be irrevocable, is being revoked. And if that doesn't send shivers down your spine, it's time we talk about one of those third-party content creators in brief, such as Kobold Press. Kobold Press is just one of the many companies that have historically produced a wide range of content for 5th edition under the original OGL. If they were to continue making more content for 5th edition or even 1D&D, they would need to sign up under OGL 1.1, which means that WotC could then republish their hard work as their own. However, what stands to make this situation worse for consumers depends on how far they are prepared to take the new OGL. They could theoretically target anyone who has released anything that has to do with the original OGL. That would mean that a large number of older intellectual properties built under the original open game license could be up for retroactive commercial profiteering as a result, such as Paizo's Pathfinder or even the original Knights of the Old Republic. And whilst I would like to think that they won't, stranger things have happened. When even Matthew Colville can be quoted in a Patreon post as stating that the new terms are very challenging, that strongly implies that the new OGL is akin to a customer hostile agreement. And MCDM Productions still have 5th edition content that will be released up until July at the very least. This brings us to the part of the video where we discuss the videos and live streams. And this is where we do have some good news. The good news is that for the vast majority of YouTubers and those who livestream their campaigns, they will continue to remain unaffected as that type of content falls under the category of fan content. A potential issue that may come to mind is, what if WotC decides that YouTubers who earn an income through these videos now fall under a new definition of third-party content creator? After all, Critical Role, one of the biggest and most profitable livestream creators, is now subject to the new Open Gaming license. That scenario I just described of YouTubers being considered third-party content creators is not going to happen, and if they try to make that happen, there are a lot more obstacles in the way. In Critical Role's case, they fall under the new OGL because they have published some settings, modules, and adventures for 5th edition, which means they are now third-party content creators in addition to being livestream producers. For everyone else, this is where the notion of free speech and fair use under copyright law actually protect those videos from this. Because if they were to expand the definition of third-party content creators to include YouTubers, it would give them unprecedented power to implement a level of censorship which would conflict directly with established law. Historically, big companies trying to go after YouTube videos has been a thing since forever ago, and nothing about that has been able to stick. Long term, D&D YouTubers and all of the RPG horror story narrators are going to be okay, safe from having our work effectively usurped. Under the new OGL as presently written, it is strongly implied that there is nothing stopping them from having a company under their new license produce a new module, cancelling that contract, and then republishing the third party's content as their own a significant amount of time later. And whilst I'm not a lawyer, I am pretty sure that at some fundamental level, this should be illegal. There is, however, a section in the leaked OGL that does allow them to develop, distribute, sell, and promote substantially similar content to a licensed work. And there is the possibility of a legal loophole that would allow them to effectively plagiarize that work. That's a scary thought. So why is WotC even contemplating a new version of the OGL that is designed to usurp third-party content and get a significant slice from the gross revenue of third-party content creators? Monetization. The CEOs themselves can be quoted for stating that they believe that Dungeons & Dragons is currently under-monetized. When it comes to making the brand more profitable when they have an existing license agreement for third parties, there's generally two options that are considered: bringing in more staff into the core company in order to produce content that is more feature complete, or create a new mandatory license that forces monetization of potentially commercial third-party content. In light of the recent Spelljammer release that was reportedly feature incomplete from a game mechanics perspective, the better option would have been bringing in more writers to write out those mechanics and make them feature complete. Instead, they went with the option that, if allowed to go through, will give them unprecedented control over a lot of third-party intellectual properties, which Noah Down's analysis of the leaked OGL recommends against. To further the idea that all WotC cares about is making even more money, another insider contacted a major D&D YouTuber by the name of D&D Shorts via email to let him know that WotC consider customers to be an obstacle to their money, with the idea that they ultimately want to have D&D Beyond take on more subscription fees to increase their profitability. Thankfully, I have never used nor had any plans to use D&D Beyond. I always preferred having my character sheets stored offline on paper or in a PDF format, but others weren't so lucky. I do think it is perfectly acceptable for everyone to be extremely concerned about what is happening. We live in uncertain times, and this is an issue that affects not just content creators, but also affects the consumers. WotC wants to make D&D more profitable? Fine. That is an admirable goal, and under any other circumstances, I would like to think that as a community, we would be there to try and help make that happen. But so long as they continue to terrorize their third-party content creators with this kind of attack, the masses of content creators who would be willing to make the kind of high-quality content that WotC wants to see developed are going to be far too afraid of producing and publishing that content for D&D to do so. And even if WotC somehow retained its most popular D&D livestreams and third-party content creators through this license, the long-term damage to consumers is yet to be seen or even estimated at the time of this video. Remember, they consider those same consumers to be an obstacle to their money. If we are talking about future livestreams role-playing campaigns using other systems, I strongly suspect that we will see something like that from Critical Role within at most 5 to 6 years. Maybe Campaign 4 will use a different system, possibly crowdfunded through their connections in the broader tabletop role-playing community. As consumers, however, we can absolutely use other tabletop role-playing systems, and Kobold Press have announced that they are now starting up a new role-playing system of their own. It won't be long before other third-party content creators migrate away from Dungeons & Dragons to other systems, or even to their own developed tabletop role-playing systems. Speaking of other systems, assuming WotC doesn't go after them, Paizo have recently announced their own version of the open game license for their own system, taking some inspiration from the Linux operating system methodology so that no publisher or company can maintain control over the creative license. And it is also currently marketed to be an open RPG license. The future of tabletop role-playing games is certainly looking like a wild ride, but not the wild ride that anyone wanted to see. I'm asking WotC to take a long, hard look at the real reasons why the original open game license that 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons shipped with was crucial to the modern success of Dungeons & Dragons. Because if they continue to alienate the D&D community by treating their third-party content creators in this manner, there will not be a D&D community to sell products to. WotC needs the tabletop role-playing community to buy their products to be commercially viable, including the subscription fee for D&D Beyond. But as a community, we do not need WotC to be able to enjoy tabletop role-playing in the capacity that we have been, however much we would like D&D to stick around. As it stands, the tabletop role-playing community will not forget what WotC has now done. We will now move on to other systems. I'd also like to thank everyone who watched this video. I would appreciate it if you shared this with as many people as possible. It's important that we all know exactly what's going on. I genuinely hate making these kinds of videos, and I sincerely hope I never have to make this kind of video ever again. No promises. I shall see you all next time.